Video 2.7 here, we're going to look at the theory of production. This is seeking to explain, it's predicting how firms are going to behave and how they're going to use their resources in order to produce the goods that they're trying to produce in the most efficient way. So it's about trying to determine, how many workers should we hire, how many units should we produce, what price should we price them at based on the costs that we're incurring. All of those things are questions that will need to be answered as part of this. Just as to clarify a couple terms here, output, if I use that term, I'm referring to the goods and or the services that are being produced, and the input is the resources that are going in to produce that output. And more specifically, when I'm talking about resources, I am referring to the resources we talked about in Unit 1, those factors of production. There were actually 4 of them. Land, labor, capital, and then entrepreneurship. I'm assuming since we're already talking about the firms using resources, the entrepreneur is already a part of that process. So I'm not including that here. So the land, meaning the space that they're using to produce the products, the labor is the workers, and the capital is the tools and machinery used to produce the goods. So those are the resources we're talking about there. We're also going to get into short run versus long run, what that's about. We're going to look at the stages of production. We're going to look at costs, and how you analyze the costs in terms of your revenue to maximize profit. So we're going to try to go through that in less than 10 minutes here. First of all, short run, long run. All right, what's the difference? This is not necessarily a time-related event here. It usually is looked at as that way, but it's not as simple as just to say anything under 6 months is short run, anything over that is long run. It's more about the resources that are being used. So what we say is that in the short run, you have multiple resources that are not able to be able to be adjusted in a timely fashion. So you got an example here that if I wanted to hire an additional worker to increase my output in my factory, I could make that happen pretty quickly in the short run, but I can't just double the size of my factory in the short run and, expand the business in that way. That's going to be more of a long run type of situation where all the resources are available to me. All right, so the purpose here, we're looking at the stages of production. There are 3, and the purpose is to look at how does output change when you change a single unit of input. This whole piece here of this video is about marginal analysis and looking at if we adjust the inputs, either whether it be a worker or we adjust it, we add a machine, anything like that. It's analyzing it. What will that bring to us in terms of benefits, in terms of the additional benefits we get from that one unit? So what we see when we see this stacked up, and you can look at the production schedule here in box A, you can see there's 3 columns here. We're looking at the number of workers. And as we add additional workers, what is the change that's occurring in total product? So total product is how much will be produced in a day based on the number of workers. And the marginal product is simply the change that's occurring. So when we go from this first worker, 0 workers, we produce nothing. The first worker is able to produce 7 units within the day. So the marginal product is the difference between the 7 and the 0, so 7. And then we go from there. So second worker adds 20. So the change that's occurred here is 13. We go from 7 to 20. So 13 is our marginal product. So we're looking at what's the change that's occurring. What's that one worker worth to us in terms of what they're providing? And what we tend to see, this is a fairly common circumstance for a factory production type setting, is that we tend to see the first stage is increasing marginal returns, where we are seeing, as we add additional units of labor or capital, we are going to see an increasing return. So like what we were just talking about, that this marginal product is going to be going up during that time. Then we get to stage 2. This is where we're still getting the benefits of adding additional workers, but we're not getting the same benefit as we were before. We're getting diminishing returns, which is why stage 2 is referred to as diminishing marginal returns. So notice over here on the table, and you can see it on the graph too, it kind of flattens out. But on our table over here, you'll see that the total product is still increasing as we add 7th, 8th, 9th worker, but the marginal product is going down. We're not getting as much out of them. And then eventually stage 3, we wouldn't actually analyze anything in stage 3, because obviously we're not going to hire an additional worker that's going to decrease our total output. But the marginal product, you can see there is actually, it gets to a negative number. Okay, so that is that. Now, when looking at these, we have to analyze the cost. There are 2 different types of costs. We have fixed costs and variable costs, and those combined together become our total cost. And from there, we can analyze that compared to our revenue to determine profits. And where is the optimal production point based on profits, because that is the goal. So our fixed costs are the costs that are incurred with no business activity. This is also known as your overhead. Had a couple examples there: rent, taxes, salaries, paying, saving up money to pay for repairs and replacement of machinery. Those are the types of things that you would pay even if you're producing nothing. You are going to have to pay your rent on your building even if you decide to take a month off. However, your variable costs are the ones that increase as your production increases. So as you add more materials to produce the goods you're producing, or you hire new workers to produce more output, that's going to increase your costs as you go. And you combine those together for the variable costs. Marginal costs are simply looking at the additional cost that's associated with making one more unit of output. And in terms of profit maximization, again, the goal is to maximize profit. That's the goal of the entrepreneur. That's what we're trying to do here. So it can be done in one of two ways. You can either increase, you adjust the way you're doing things to cut your costs, reduce your costs, or you find a way to increase your revenue, make your product better and more appealing, and you can increase your revenue through higher prices. It needs to be one of those two things, or it could be a combination of the two in order to increase profits. All right, so that's what we're working towards. And a good example of this would be e-commerce type things. So online stores that have low overhead. So fixed costs are relatively low, and your only expenses are coming when you're actually producing, which cuts down those costs and makes it more profitable often than like opening a store. Okay, so a few terms with the revenue here. Total revenue is all the revenue of a business that they're bringing in. Okay, so that's the money, that's the sales price. All right, so you're not including costs or anything like that. It's just looking at the sandwich was $6, so this is $6 in revenue. The marginal revenue is, again, this is a marginal analysis thing. What's the additional revenue that we're getting from producing one more unit of output? So that term marginal is going to be really, really important. It has been throughout the semester, but definitely on this part, you're going to need to know what that term is referring to. And marginal analysis is looking at the decision-making process based on comparing additional benefits to the cost and then making a decision. Ultimately, we are profit maximizing at the point where marginal revenue is equal to, or as close to possible to equal to, marginal cost. I'm going to show you that on a table here on our next one. So you can see here, if you look at the total profit line, well, let me quickly run through this. You got your costs over here. This was the schedule that we had already started with production-wise, and then the costs associated with it. You can see your fixed costs, your variable costs. Fixed cost stays the same because it doesn't matter if you're producing. Variable cost increases as you increase the units, so does total cost. And then your marginal cost is going to adjust as that happens. Now notice that early on, when we're most efficient in stage one, our marginal cost goes down. And then as we get to stage two, it begins to increase again. But as long as the marginal cost is less than our marginal revenue, we should continue to produce. Now notice here, once that we match up here and our marginal revenue is equal to 15, and our marginal cost is equal to 15, that's where we're maximizing profits, and we're at 1,300 there. So just kind of a trick there. It's definitely something you're going to want to remember. The MR equals MC. That's an important step to remember. All right, have a good one, guys.